everyone, and welcome to my June reading wrap-up. I thought that there weren't going to be that many books in this wrap-up. Halfway through the month I was feeling really down about my reading and really pessimistic about it, but it turned out so much better than I expected it to be. The first book that I consumed in June was The Humans by Matt Haig. The reason I say consumed is because I listened to it on audiobook as opposed to flipping through pages. I had very mixed feelings on this book, and I think that's why I felt like I was having a bit of an iffy reading month halfway through. I just had mixed feelings on a lot of the things I was reading. The premise of Humans is that there is a mathematics professor called Professor Andrew Martin in Cambridge who has discovered the secret to this really important formula that will revolutionize how we see the world. It will revolutionize physics and mathematics, and aliens don't want us to know about this because it would change so much. So they kill Professor Andrew Martin, and an alien takes his place and takes on his physical form. His mission is to destroy any evidence of the existence of this formula and kill anyone that Andrew may have told about it. What the alien doesn't expect, though, is to start to form bonds with the people in Andrew's life, such as Andrew's wife and Andrew's son. And that kind of throws a spanner in the works because he can't kill people when he's come to love them. I really enjoyed the first half of this book where the alien was kind of pointing out oddities in human life and strange little things that we do, but I found the second half of the book a little bit problematic and a little bit preachy. It kind of felt like it was becoming a self-help book, and it was just like the author throwing life advice at you, which I know Matt Haig did go on to write, is it like Reasons to Stay Alive or something like that? But at times it definitely felt like he was throwing me life advice that I didn't want or need through his characters. And I just found the relationships that the main character had to be so problematic in so many ways. And there was one character in particular that I didn't think was treated sympathetically at all, and she really should have been. If you've read this book, then do let me know what you thought about it, because I'm wondering if it's just me, because everyone I've spoken to about it so far have really loved it, so maybe it's just me being picky. Throughout the month I was also reading this poetry collection, The Adoption Papers by Jackie Kay, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was so good and a great place to start with Jackie Kay's poetry. So this is predominantly a story about a young black girl being adopted by white Scottish parents, and it is told from three different viewpoints: the daughter, the mother, and the birth mother. Kay also uses different fonts for these different viewpoints, and I thought that was really beneficial for getting to grips with it. I particularly found the treatment of the birth mother really interesting, and I don't think it's something that I've really seen depicted that much. After reading her novel Trumpet, a lot of the ideas and themes in this collection were quite familiar to me, which I thought was a good place to start going into it, but this is much more autobiographical than her novel was. Next I have The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherynne and Valente. And I really enjoyed this book, although I don't think the format I read it in helped. I read it on ebook, and I don't think that was the best way to read this book. I think, like a lot of children's books, it helps the atmosphere of reading them if you have physical pages to turn. I also think I may have hyped it up too much. I heard so many great things that I kind of expected it to be a 5-star read, but I don't really get that from children's books anymore. They tend to be like 3, maybe 4-star reads, and I expected too much from this, I think. Not because it wasn't a 5-star children's book, just because it wasn't a 5-star book for me. But this is about a 12-year-old girl named September whose father has gone to war and whose mother has gone to work, and she is swept away by the green wind to Fairyland. I'm not going to say too much about the plot other than that, because I think it's just something you need to immerse yourself in and experience step by step. But think kind of Alice in Wonderland and the Golden Compass. It was so whimsical and fantastical, and I really enjoyed it, and I am hoping to get to the next few books in the series soon. Next up is a 5-star read, and that is Art Spiegelman's The Complete Mouse. I loved this so much. This is a non-fiction graphic novel about Art Spiegelman gathering information from his father, who lived and survived in Hitler's Europe. Not only was this a really touching and informative depiction of what it was like being in Hitler's Europe, There was also a really touching father-son relationship throughout this book, because this book doesn't just contain the stories that his father told him, it contains drawings and depictions of the conversations they had while that discussion was going on. So you do have the story of the Holocaust going on, but also his relationship with his father, and the way those two were blended was so seamless and intricate. You see the author's frustrations with dealing with an older relative and having that responsibility and difficulty on your shoulders, and you definitely understand why he finds his father so frustrating. But as you read the story of his survival during the Holocaust, a lot of his annoying behaviours start to make sense. I also forgot to mention that all of the Jewish characters in this book are depicted as mice, and all of the Nazis are cats, and there's a few different nationalities in the mix there as well. And that's definitely effective without being intrusive. Oh my god, I think this might be my favourite graphic novel ever. It is amazing. So good. Is it a graphic novel though? It's not really, because it's non-fiction, it's not a novel. Graphic memoir? This month I also read The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman, and this was another book that I had mixed feelings on. This novel features a immortal female spy stroke librarian who travels through different dimensions trying to collect different important books from history. So Irene thinks that she is going to have the chance to have a little bit of a break after going on one mission, but that is not the case, and she is sent to London with her new assistant in order to find a very, very important book. But when they get there, it turns out that the book is missing. While I did overall enjoy this book, I did have a few problems with it. I thought that Irene was a little bit of a Mary Sue. I thought some of the world building things weren't explained fully enough for me. And I also thought the brief hint of a romance plot with her assistant was just unnecessary and not done very well. In saying that, this book was filled with so much admiration and enthusiasm for books, so as a book lover, that was just something that I couldn't not enjoy. I thought it was fantastic. If you do want to know my full thoughts on it, I did do a full review, and I will leave a link to that down in the description bar. Another book that I had mixed feelings on this month was Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet by Charlie N. Holmberg, and this was a 2.5-star read for me, which is one of the saddest of the ratings, because there was nothing particularly wrong about it, but there just wasn't anything particularly great about it. So this tells the story of a woman who has the ability to bake emotions into cakes, and also attributes and abilities, and whoever consumes the cake will then have those emotions, attributes, abilities. And when her town is raided by bandits, she is kidnapped and sold to a very strange man who makes her bake cakes for his clients, whoever they may be. Culinary and baking related descriptions in this book were gorgeous. They were stunning. They were beautiful. But the plot and the characters just weren't up to scratch for me. I didn't find the plot particularly driven. I didn't have any real attachment to any of the characters. I wasn't particularly interested in the relationships they had. Some of the relationships were very weird. And conveniently, our protagonist has lost her memories, and that just, it put a bit of a dampener on it for me. While I do understand part of the journey was to go through it with her and piece together her fragmented memories, it was just too convenient. It was, I just didn't like it. Again, my full thoughts are in a review, which I will link down in the description. Thankfully, we are back to a 5-star read, because I read The Museum of You by Caris Bray. Oh my god, I love this book so much. This was my favourite book of the month, and I thought Mouse was going to be a front runner for my favourite book of the month, but then The Museum of You came along. This is about a young girl named Clover whose mother passed away when she was only a baby, and Clover doesn't know an awful lot about her mother. Her father has kept a lot of things internalized and hasn't really spoken about them enough with Clover. Clover decides to go through a lot of old belongings that her father has kept. He's a bit of a hoarder, and she puts together and curates the Museum of You, the museum of her mother. We get two kind of perspectives in this book, Clover and her father, and while Clover attaches certain narratives and imagines stories to these objects that she puts in the museum in the spare bedroom. We find out through her father's perspective that these narratives she's creating aren't quite accurate. This book was just so touching and so lovely, and I loved the depiction of single fathers and what it's like to be a single father dealing with a girl who is in the process of going through puberty. This book did feature Clover's first period, and I am all about putting more menstruation in literature. All about it. But of course that dynamic does give a lot of opportunity for humour, and this book is really funny. Like, there's scenes where they're watching Bake Off and it's really, really funny. The Museum of You is easily among the very best books that I have read this year. It was bloody brilliant. Currently I am halfway through Kirsty Logan's The Grace Keepers, and I'm really enjoying this book when I pick it up. I don't have that much desire to go back to it, which is weird, but I will talk about this more in my July wrap up. So this month I read 7.5 books, and that's a really good number. I don't know why I was feeling so down about it recently. I think compared to what I've read like throughout all the other months of the year, it's a little bit less, but that's still a really great number of books. And I think I had become too focused on like getting my number of books read to a certain level. I was too focused on numbers, and I'm kind of glad I've brought it down a little bit. It has been a very busy month with moving and getting pets and just life, working. If you have any thoughts on any of these books, do be sure to let me know and we can have a little bit of a chat down in the comments. And do you have any tips for making time for reading? Because I'm kind of struggling with it at the minute. I didn't really struggle with it before, but I think in the new house I kind of am.